New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet describes his state as being dressed for success after releasing the budget yesterday. It's splashed the cash on infrastructure and families. And Dominic Perrottet joins me live now. Dominic Perrottet, thanks for your time. Are you just an old school Labor Treasurer or Oprah giving everyone a prize?
Not at all. This is a great Liberal and national budget. It shows that strong financial management here in our state of the last 10 years have built strong foundations that we can continue to build a better future here in New South Wales with record infrastructure funding, but at the same time meet families where they are and continue to stimulate the economy. As we've seen today, the pandemic is not over and we've got to continue to invest to get our economy through this.
Are you going to pull it back before the election? It's going to be pretty hard to, after spending this much money, to then pull the reins, isn't it?
Well, our debt position is incredibly affordable and manageable. Just last year, we borrowed $33 billion at an average of about 1.48%. We have a pathway back to surplus here in New South Wales. Other states are in more structural deficit situations. We continue to cut taxes to ease pressure on businesses and families across the state. And we made the decision to increase wages by 2.5% a year. We said last year that when we put that pause on, that we would assess the situation, and we set a goal in terms of where we wanted the budget position to be. We were able to achieve that and provide $2.7 billion in investment for public servants right across the state.
And stamp duty receipts have killed any opportunity for property tax reform, haven't they?
Not really. I mean, I think, once again, states rely on inefficient taxes. We shouldn't be relying on stamp duty as a river of gold. We need to have a tax system right around the country that drives jobs growth, economic growth and productivity, and we're going to continue to work on that. We released the progress report, identifies around 8 areas that need further refinement and work, and we'll finesse our thinking in relation to that. In this budget as well, though, we set out substantial reform when it comes to electric vehicles and also on the education space by trialling new school hours, fast-tracking teachers from other professions into schools right across the state to enrich our children's education. So there's a whole range of reforms. We're not just focused on the here and now. We know families are doing it tough. We're putting more money back in hip pockets, but at the same time, we're looking and reforming for the future.
Well, you say stamps are inefficient. They've increased $4.5 billion on last year. Indeed, they are rivers of gold. What treasurer in his right mind would give that up?
Well, it's not just about the budget, Laura. I mean, if you look at the focus that we've taken over the last 12 months, we said that we'd prioritise the economy over the budget, and as a result, both have benefited. Our economy is back to pre-COVID levels. The 270,000 jobs we lost during the pandemic have all been recovered, plus we've added 36,000 more, and we've also halved the deficit here in our state. So if you get the economy moving, the budget benefits off the back of that. So we should always be looking at better ways. There's never an easy time to reform. There's always challenges with that. But I think the judgment that's going to be most important is not how governments simply recover from the pandemic, but what we're actually doing to set up our state for success going forward. There's 60 recommendations that we have in the Productivity Commission white paper here, and I'll be reporting on those every 6 months to Parliament to get moving.
Well, Treasurer, I'm confused because your surplus is built on stamp duty.
Well, it's all the largest increase is on GST revenue, and that's off the back of the fact that we've been able to keep our economy open. We haven't locked down. We're here at New South Wales is the confidence capital of Australia. With confidence up, spending's up, and that leads not just to a stronger economy, but to a stronger budget position. But we need to always be looking at better ways of doing things. We're not talking about simply axing a tax here. What we're talking about is looking at a better tax mix that helps to continue drive the economy and provide better opportunity for generations to come.
Now, your federal government partners, same political party I might say, have not given you an answer on university students back into New South Wales yet. What's going on there? What's the delay? It was a couple of weeks ago now that you put forward this plan.
We've been having very constructive discussions with them. That's going very well. My expectation is that will be approved imminently, and we welcome the engagement that they've had. I mean, our proposal's been signed off by police and health. And if you look at the biggest challenge on the ground now, Laura, if you look at the confronting scenes we had just 12 months ago with queues outside Centrelink. The biggest issue here in New South Wales, and probably around the country, is the lack of skilled labour that we need to bring in. So I think the advantage of getting this international students program off the ground is that hopefully that could become a template for other areas as we move through the next 12 months, because it's a real challenge for businesses right across the state to be getting the labour they need.
Indeed. Now, look, we're looking very closely at the Sydney numbers. We're a bit concerned about where they went yesterday, almost doubled. I take the point that certainly a lot of these cases are linked, all but two. Now we're hearing, and you had to spend time in isolation for 2 weeks after going to an exposure site. Now 4 New South Wales Nationals MPs are in isolation after going to a factional dinner on Monday, according to Yoni Bashan from The Australian. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I understand that they are in isolation, as I had to do. So obviously the Liberal Party has a bit of an advantage here at the moment this week, a few extra numbers on the National Party. But look, the reality is, Laura, there's always going to be cases from time to time, and ultimately, if we follow that health advice and you go through that isolation phase, it ensures keeping our state safe. So. Obviously, we're watching those numbers very carefully. The Premier will be speaking later today in relation to what those numbers have been overnight. But ultimately, what we need to do is make sure we follow that advice, and that will help.
Well, what is the advice? Can you give us a bit of insight? Are we going to go into a lockdown in Sydney?
Obviously, the Premier will. No, we won't be. The Premier will be speaking a bit later in relation to that. We've always wanted to have a balanced and proportionate response here in our state, and the reality is, if you end up in one of those situations where there has been a positive COVID case and you have been in one of those locations, then you have to get tested and isolate for the equivalent of the 14 days from that moment. So that has worked very well in our state, and we'll continue that approach and that policy going forward.
And what do you think about the other states that have just slammed their borders shut to New South Wales, even to some of these local government areas who don't have active cases?
Well, I'm not privy to the advice that they're receiving, but I think we need to make sure. This is just another example of the fact that I think we need to set a target for all the borders reopening, because it's very clear that COVID is not going away. We can't just have knee-jerk lockdowns. We need to get the vaccination rolled out as quickly as possible. We need to set a target of what success looks like so we can re-enter the world. I think what you're seeing here is a microcosm of the larger problem, and that is opening the international borders, or at least setting a date to it. I said yesterday, the closure of international borders is costing the New South Wales economy around $300 million a month. So that's going to be a challenge going forward, and I think if we don't set targets, even if we don't achieve them, we're at risk of just meandering through.
Okay, just one final question. I know the Premier is up in about 40 minutes' time, but I'm going to try and extract as much information from you as possible. So you've ruled out a Sydney lockdown, but are we looking at more restrictions in 40 minutes?
Look, I'm not going to steal the Premier's thunder. She'll be providing advice a bit later today. I understand with the Health Minister, they're working through that now. I've had some conversations with her this morning in relation to that. But what you can be assured of is that we'll continue the balanced and proportionate response that we've had in our state that's kept our economy open, and that's been reflected in the strong budget position we announced yesterday.